3,400-strong Leipzig police, uniformed and equipped like the German infantry, remained under the direct command of their own senior officer, Major General Wilhelm von Grollmann. Grollmann had already decided that the defense of Leipzig was pointless and would merely lead to the deaths of more soldiers and civilians and further destruction of infrastructure and property. Grollmann argued that von Ponsed's forces were much too weak to hold the city, lacking heavy weapons, exposing Leipzig's remaining 750,000 citizens to unnecessary suffering. Grollmann outranked Colonel von Ponsed, but the latter was battle commandant of the city and a professional soldier, and also the winner of the Knight's Cross, Germany's highest award for gallantry. Surrender was anathema to such a man. Von Ponsed was determined to fight to the very end in Leipzig, and to make the Americans pay a heavy price in blood and misery for each street and house. Von Grollmann, on the other hand, reached out to the Americans on the 18th of April, managing to telephone Major General Robertson, commanding officer of the 2nd Infantry Division, offering to surrender the city. While this news climbed the U.S. chain of command, von Ponsed phoned Grollmann and told him that he would not surrender. Grollmann now sent out one of his junior officers to the Americans. The young American captain was then taken through German lines to Grollmann's headquarters, but by this time, von Ponsed's men had already begun active resistance against the forward elements of the 2nd and 69th Divisions. Ponsed barricaded the town hall area with most of his forces, and also occupied the extraordinary building with 300 of his best men. Completed in Leipzig in 1913, the monument to the Battle of the Nations was constructed to commemorate the 1813 Battle of Leipzig during the Napoleonic Wars, also known as the Battle of the Nations. It commemorated the defeat of Emperor Napoleon at Leipzig by a coalition army from Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Italy. The structure is massive, 91 meters or 299 feet tall. Inside are 500 steps leading up to a viewing platform. Constructed of 26,500 granite blocks, it cost the equivalent of $30 million or 23 million pounds in today's money to build. It consists of 2 stories. The first story is a crypt containing 8 large statues of fallen warriors, each next to smaller guardians of the dead statues. The second story is the Hall of Fame, consisting of 4 statues, each 9.5 meters or 31 feet tall, representing the
My phone's broken,
legendary historic
so I haven't been online much.
Bravery, faith, sacrifice.
I'm going to get another one though.
12-meter or 39-foot main figure on the front of the memorial represents the Archangel Michael, considered a war god by the Germans. The monument was well built and solid and could be used as a fortress, and in 1945 that's precisely what it became. On the 19th of April 1945, Task Force Zwiebel of the U.S. 69th Infantry Division approached the monument. Colonel von Ponsed opened fire. Shermans raced past at top speed towards the town hall, with many of the infantry who had been riding on the tanks flung off. There were about 300 German troops defending the town hall area. At dawn on the 19th of April, a company of infantry from the 69th Division attempted to assault the town hall. They were quickly pinned down. Lieutenant Colonel Zwiebel and his tanks moved forward to support. The American tanks moved up into columns with infantry and attacked. They were stopped by Panzerfausts, machine guns and rifle fire. 3 times they tried and failed. At 9 a.m.
I got 69 subscribers. Fucking A, guys. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it all.
He convinced the Germans to surrender.
69.
Placed flamethrowers, heavy artillery and a full division of infantry.
That's
The
awesome.
mayor of Leipzig, the city treasurer, and their families chose suicide instead of surrendering, as well as the city's Volkssturm commander. The Americans now turned to ending resistance at the monument to the Battle of the Nations. Through most of the 19th, U.S. tanks, tank destroyers, and artillery firing over open sites pounded the monument with little effect, the Germans shooting back. The area was packed with ammunition, and von Ponsed still had about 300 men under his direct command. Von Ponsed also made the Americans' job extra difficult. POWs captured earlier in the battle. Their presence ensured that the attacking American forces could not use their usual bunker-busting weapon of choice, the flamethrower, against the structure. A standoff ensued. Von Ponset could have theoretically held out for days or even weeks, creating a serious problem for the US occupation of Leipzig. Enter Captain Hans Trefus, a German-born interrogator with the US 273rd Infantry Regiment. Trefus, a German POW, and another US officer warily approached the monument under a flag of truce at 3 p.m. on the 19th of April. Colonel von Ponset met with them. When told that his situation was hopeless, von Ponset responded that he was under direct Führer orders not to surrender. For 11 hours, Trefus and von Ponset argued. Finally, the was reached. At 2 a.m. on the 20th of April 1945, ironically Hitler's last birthday, von Ponset and his men emerged to surrender. The monument was occupied by American troops, the guardians of the dead still standing silent sentinel over the scene of the last German stand in Leipzig. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share, and support my channel at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below. Poland, September 1939. The Polish army is fighting valiantly to defend its country from a massive German blitzkrieg attack. The Poles lack the armor and aircraft that the Germans are using in devastating combination, but the invasion is by no means a walkover. The Poles fight back with everything in their arsenal, including one of the world's smallest armored vehicles. When Germany invaded, the Polish army, heavily reliant on horse cavalry, had little armor to speak of. It possessed 170 11-ton 7TP light tanks, 50 British Vickers 6-ton tanks, and 67 Renault FT-17 light tanks of World War I vintage. The backbone of the armoured forces were around 700 TKS tankettes. The 2.9-ton TKS is the Polish Army's main armoured vehicle at the time. Based on the interwar British Carden-Loyd tankette, the two-man vehicle comes in two types. Most of the infantry support version that mounts a single machine gun. Powered by a 46 horsepower Fiat engine, the TKS has 8 to 10 millimeter thick armor that will stop bullets and shrapnel, but not cannon or tank rounds. In order to provide a bit more punch, about 24 TKS tankettes have received a Polish 20 millimeter autocannon, the WZ-38FK. It penetrates 25 millimeters of steel armor. These vehicles are distributed around the army to stiffen its anti-tank capabilities. Sergeant First Class Edmund Orlik commands one such upgun TKS. A Polish officer cadet when war broke out, Orlik was instead made a senior NCO and assigned to the 71st Armored Battalion. This unit had 8 WZ-34 armored cars equipped with 37mm guns and machine guns, and a company of TKS tankettes. Orlik commands a half platoon consisting of his own 20mm cannon-armed TKS and 2 armed only with machine guns. In constant action since the German invasion started on the 1st of September 1939, Orlik first encountered German tanks on the 14th of September, providing fire support for a Polish cavalry attack across the Bzura River. Opposing them were Panzer IIs of the 36th Panzer Regiment, also armed with 20mm cannons. The German weapons were of a lower velocity than Orlik's. In an ambush position on the crest of a hill, Orlik picked off 3 Panzer IIs, his 20mm cannon easily able to penetrate the German tank's 14mm of armor. Although Orlik scored his kills, the retreat towards Warsaw continued. On the 16th of September, his unit had to destroy its armored cars as they couldn't ford the Bzura River. Wear and tear, lack of spares and fuel meant that most of the TKS tankettes were also abandoned 2 days later. Orlik's half platoon remained in action, however. On the 18th, he was sent to reconnoiter the road through the Campinos forest. The approach of a German column forced a change in mission. Orlik ordered his 2 machine-gun-armed TKS back into covering positions, while he selected an ambush position for his 20mm armed tankette. He found the perfect place overlooking a crossroads and waited. A few minutes later, the German column hove into view. It was commanded by 23-year-old Second Lieutenant Victor Ehrprinz von Ratibor. An Ehrprinz is basically the eldest son of an hereditary prince, and Victor was the son and heir of Silesian nobleman the Prince of Ratibor, who ironically was opposed to the Nazis. The younger Prince von Ratibor led the German column in the largest tank then in Wehrmacht service, the Panzer IV-B, armed with a short-barreled 75mm gun. Its frontal armor was 30mm thick, meaning that Orlik's 20mm gun would not be able to penetrate. The other 2 German tanks were Panzer 35Ts, Czech tanks used by the Germans, armed with 37mm guns, with 25mm of frontal armor. But both German tank types were vulnerable to flank attacks, where their armor was only 14 to 16mm thick.
69
Sergeant
subscribers.
Orlik had the
Smoking
added
on the
advantage
fucking
of
planet.
concealment. His tankette was so small, Prince von Ratibor and his men couldn't see it. Once the leading 35T was side onto Orlik, he opened fire with his cannon. The German tank burst into flames. The following 2 tanks plunged off the road and began firing blindly in all directions. Orlik now fired at Prince von Ratibor's Panzer IV, initially with no effect. Then Orlik emptied an entire magazine into its side. It too burst into flames. The last German tank pulled back, still firing blindly. Moving to a fresh position, the tiny TKS closed within 60 meters in the undergrowth and slammed several rounds into the 35T. Following this, Orlik destroyed some German trucks. Sergeant Orlik left his tankette, pulled out his service pistol, and took 2 German tank crewmen prisoner. And then, incredibly, Sergeant Orlik, covered by his driver, managed to pull the grievously wounded Prince von Ratibor out of the turret of his burning Panzer IV. But the young German officer died a few moments later from his injuries. Sergeant Orlik would continue in action for several more days, and in total knocked out 13 German tanks from the Polish campaign, for which he was awarded the Cross of Valor. He died in 1982 in Poland. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also support my channel, PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.
Let's look at some common myths about the Red Army in the Second World War and how they hold up against current academic research. Because in some cases you might be quite surprised, at least I was sometimes. Let's start with the myth that the Soviet Union possessed a pool of unlimited manpower. This notion already appeared before the Second World War and was still in use during the Cold War. Yet if we take a closer look, things get
Thanks
interesting.
again, guys.
Some of you might know that in the last stages of the war, there were some issues with manpower, but already in 1943, so 2 years into the war, there were some issues. For example, as the regime faced a manpower shortage in 1943, it launched a special recruitment effort directed at Komsomol
Jesus freak out.
It set a target of 160,000 men to be distributed among 10 different military districts and fronts. As you can imagine, this situation did not get better over the course of the war. By the second half of 1944, the Red Army, and particularly the infantry, was suffering from acute manpower shortages. Those reserves that might have seemed almost bottomless in 1941 had proven otherwise, thanks to a large extent to the operational and operational strategic failures of Stalin and the High Command early in the war, and in particular during 1941-1942. To deal with this, the Red Army used various measures. One was to fill up their
Jesus
ranks
freak
with men
out.
from recently liberated territory.